There are three facts you need to understand about my family before this story makes any sense. First, my brother Garrett is convinced that success can only be counted in children produced and property owned. Second, my sister in law Charlene has mastered a very specific kind of cruelty, the tender look of concern that's really nothing more than smugness wearing a polite mask. Third, in the 22 years since I enlisted in the Air Force, neither of them has asked me a single meaningful question about my life. Those three truths explain everything that followed at my nephew's high school graduation party. They explain why I allowed them to believe, for 2 full decades, that I was a standing disappointment. And they explain the expression on Garrett's face when reality finally exploded inside the tidy little worldview he'd built for himself. But I'm jumping ahead. The invitation showed up 3 weeks before the party, passed along by my mother with her customary anxious note attached. Please try to come, Kiana. It would mean so much to Garrett and to Tyler. He asks about you. Tyler was 18, graduating from an elite prep school in Connecticut, Yale-bound in the fall. I'd seen him maybe half a dozen times in the last 10 years, short visits during my infrequent trips home. Stiff conversations where he asked about the military with the polite curiosity of someone who'd been instructed to humor the strange aunt. My first instinct was to decline. At the time, I was in the middle of overseeing a major procurement review at the Pentagon, coordinating across 3 commands on a $2.4 billion satellite communications upgrade. The kind of responsibility that doesn't pause for family milestones. But then my mother called, her voice carrying that familiar tremor that meant she'd already imagined the worst. Garrett keeps asking if you're coming, she said. He's worried you'll cancel again. You know how he gets. I did know. Garrett had spent our entire adult lives seesawing between pity and disappointment, like I was a failed renovation project he'd poured time into before finally walking away. The sister who'd squandered her potential by choosing the military instead of an MBA. The one who, at 45, still lacked the things that supposedly mattered: husband, kids, a sprawling suburban house. I'll be there, I told my mother. Sometimes you show up just to prove you still can, even when you'd rather be anywhere else. The party was held at Garrett's place, a massive colonial in Westchester with a lawn so pristine it suggested someone was employed solely to worry about grass. I arrived exactly 15 minutes late, early enough to avoid being rude, late enough to skip the opening round of small talk. Cars packed the circular driveway, Mercedes, BMWs, a lone Tesla that clearly belonged to someone who wanted everyone to notice it was a Tesla. My rental sedan looked suitably out of place, which didn't bother me. I'd learned long ago that fitting in with Garrett's social circle required more effort than it deserved. Charlene answered the door wearing a white linen dress that almost certainly cost more than my monthly car payment. Her smile was bright and razor-sharp. Kiana, you made it. She gave me a brief hug, the kind that avoided actual contact. We weren't sure you'd be able to get away from wherever you are these days. Colorado Springs, I said. And yes, I managed. Colorado Springs, she repeated, with the enthusiasm one might reserve for Des Moines or Cleveland. Still in the Air Force then, still in the Air Force. Well, come in. Everyone's out back. Garrett will be so happy to see you. The way she said it suggested mild surprise at best, inconvenience at worst. The backyard was a monument to Garrett's version of achievement, an enormous deck with built-in seating, a stone patio with a fire pit. Professional landscaping that probably required more upkeep than my entire apartment. 50 or 60 people wandered around holding wine glasses, their conversations blending into a soft hum of comfortable affluence. I recognized familiar faces, relatives and family friends who'd watched Garrett and me grow up. They offered polite nods, the kind that acknowledged my existence without quite understanding my presence. Tyler stood near the grill with a cluster of friends, all dressed in that unmistakable prep school uniform of understated wealth. Expensive jeans, low-key polos, and the easy confidence of people who'd never had to worry about money. He spotted me and waved, a genuine smile breaking through his teenage reserve. Aunt Kiana, he crossed the patio and hugged me, more warmth than I'd received from anyone else that afternoon. I didn't think you'd make it. Wouldn't miss it, I said. Congratulations on Yale. That's a big deal, thanks, I'm really excited. He glanced back toward his friends. Do you want to meet everyone? Some of them are going to the academy next year. The Air Force Academy, the words landed heavier than Tyler realized. Maybe later, I said, go be with your friends. This is your day, he nodded and headed back, leaving me near the edge of the patio. I picked up a glass of white wine, crisp, carefully chosen, probably meant to complement the catered appetizers, and settled into my familiar role, the peripheral relative technically present. Functionally invisible. Garrett found me about 20 minutes later. There she is, he announced loudly, drawing glances from nearby conversations. My sister, the career woman, he said it like a diagnosis. He hugged me with exaggerated enthusiasm, somehow managing to make it feel patronizing, like congratulating a child for attending a grown-up event. Good to see you, Garrett. You too. It's been what, 2 years, 3, 18 months, Christmas before last. Right. Right? He gave me that familiar evaluating look, the one that silently tallied all the ways I'd failed to meet his expectations. You look good, tired but good. They working you too hard at the base, staying busy. I bet. So what is it you do again? Logistics, procurement, strategic planning, I said, defaulting to my usual vague answer. Budget analysis, right, important stuff, I'm sure. He smiled the way people smile at macaroni art. Not like running a business, but important in its own way. Garrett owned a consulting firm focused on corporate restructuring. It made him wealthy and gave him endless opinions on how everyone else should live. How's business? I asked, because deflection was easier than defense. Booming. We just closed a $40 million deal with a pharmaceutical company, biggest yet. He leaned closer. Honestly, I'm thinking about early retirement, maybe 55. Florida golf, enjoy life. Sounds nice. You've got a retirement plan, right? I mean, the military pension is fine, but you need investments, 401k. Real planning, there it was, Garrett's inability to resist turning every conversation into a financial evaluation of a future he assumed I hadn't prepared for. I've got a plan, I said evenly. Good, you can't depend on government benefits alone. You've got to build wealth, create security. He gestured broadly at his house, his yard, his guests. That's what this is, smart decisions. Long-term thinking. I took another sip of wine and let him enjoy his moment. It cost me nothing. I'm glad you're here, he continued. Tyler really appreciates it. He doesn't see you much, but he knows his aunt is out there doing her thing, as if I'd taken up pottery or beekeeping instead of serving my country. Charlene appeared beside him, her hands sliding onto his arm in that proprietary way that signaled rescue. Honey, people are asking about the college fund. Should we make the announcement? Right, yes, Garrett straightened, slipping into public speech mode. Let me get Tyler. They walked off, leaving me alone once again. I drifted toward the far edge of the yard, where the property bordered a small patch of woods. From there, I could see the whole scene, successful adults with successful lives celebrating children destined for successful futures. I'd chosen something else. 22 years earlier, I'd stepped away from the life Garrett had mapped out for me. MBA, corporate ladder, conventional markers of achievement. I'd chosen the Air Force Academy instead, to my family's confusion and quiet disapproval. But what will you do after? My mother had asked, as though military service were a temporary detour. Serve, I'd answered, final, non-negotiable, and I had 22 years of service, climbing a different ladder, measuring success by different standards. Garrett had his consulting firm, his Mercedes, his Westchester house. I had 3 deployments, 2 master's degrees, and the rank of colonel. He never asked about any of it, never wanted to know. Eventually, I stopped offering. Around 4 o'clock, Garrett clinked his wine glass and called everyone together. Conversations faded as people turned toward him, smiling expectantly. Thank you all for coming, he said, his voice polished by years of presentations. Charlene and I are so grateful you're here to celebrate Tyler's graduation and his acceptance to Yale. Applause followed. Tyler stood beside him, pleased and slightly uncomfortable. As many of you know, Garrett continued, Charlene and I have been saving for Tyler's education since he was born. We set up a college fund, contributed to it every month, made smart investments, and I'm proud to say we fully funded all 4 years of his Yale education, plus graduate school if he chooses. More applause, some impressed murmurs. This was the kind of achievement that mattered in Garrett's world, visible, quantifiable proof of good parenting and financial acumen. It got me thinking, Garrett said, his tone shifting to something more philosophical about planning, about sacrifice, about making choices that set your children up for success. His eyes found me in the crowd just for a second. Not everyone makes those choices. Some people prioritize other things, career over family, independence over stability, and that's fine. Everyone has their path. My jaw tightened. He was doing this now in front of 50 people using his son's graduation party to deliver a sermon about my life choices. But I look at Tyler and I think about how grateful I am that we planned, that we saved, that we built something lasting. He put his arm around Tyler. That's what family is about. Legacy, future, giving your children what you didn't have. Charlene was nodding along, her expression one of solemn agreement. Several parents in the crowd were doing the same. The self-satisfied nods of people who'd made the right choices. Garrett's eyes found me again. Some people don't have to worry about college funds. No kids, no savings, no plan. He said it lightly, like it was a joke we were all in on. But for those of us who chose family, who prioritized the next generation, it's worth every sacrifice. The words landed like stones. I felt people glancing at me, quick assessing looks. The childless aunt, the one without a plan, the cautionary tale about what happens when you don't prioritize the things that matter. Charlene touched Garrett's shoulder, her voice soft but carrying. Don't be mean, but she was smiling. That particular smile that said the meanness was the point, dressed up as concern. I took another sip of wine. Let them have their moment. Let them believe what they wanted to believe. Anyway, Garrett said, moving past the moment with practiced ease. Thank you all for being here. Let's celebrate Tyler and all the incredible graduates. More applause. People turned back to their conversations. The moment passed, except it didn't, not really. I could feel the residual attention. People watching me peripherally, probably wondering what my story was. The woman with no kids, no plan, no legacy. The sister who disappointed everyone by choosing wrong. I was considering leaving early when a woman I didn't recognize approached me. Late 50s professional attire that stood out slightly from the casual wealth of the rest of the party. She had the bearing of someone used to authority. Excuse me, she said. I'm Dr. Libby Thew. I'm the head college counselor at Tyler's school. Kiana Engel, I said, shaking her hand, Tyler's aunt. Yes, I know. Her smile was warm, genuine. I've been hoping to meet you. Tyler mentioned you might be here. Did he? He talks about you sometimes, says you're in the Air Force. He's quite proud of his aunt, actually. That surprised me. I'd assumed I was barely a footnote in Tyler's life. That's kind of him, I said, Doctor. Thew studied me with a different kind of assessment than I was used to, not judging but recognizing something. You're stationed at the academy, aren't you? Colorado Springs. Quote, my guard went up immediately. I work at the academy complex. Yes, I thought so. Tyler said you did something with the Air Force Academy. She paused, her expression shifting to something more serious. Colonel, I wanted to thank you personally for endowing the scholarship fund. We've sent 50 students to the academy because of you. The world stopped, not metaphorically. Everything actually stopped. The conversations around us, the movement of people, the sound of birds in the trees. Or maybe it was just that all of it suddenly felt very far away, muted by the roaring silence of what had just been said. I'm sorry, I managed. The Ingalls Scholarship Fund for Academy Preparation. We've been administering it for 8 years now? 9. It's one of our most prestigious scholarships. Full funding for academy prep programs, mentorship, everything. She was smiling, genuinely pleased. You've changed lives, Colonel. Some of our students would never have even applied without that support. I became aware very slowly that people were listening. The conversations around us had faded. Garrett stood maybe 10 ft away, his face blank with confusion. Kiana, my mother's voice somewhere to my left. What is she talking about, Doctor? Thew looked between me and the gathering audience, her expression shifting to confusion. I'm sorry, is this not public knowledge? No, I said quietly, it's not, oh. She looked genuinely distressed. I apologize, I assumed. Tyler said you were very private about your work, but I thought family would know about the scholarship fund. What scholarship fund? Garrett's voice cut across the patio. He'd moved closer, his CEO instincts activated by the scent of something he didn't understand. What is she talking about, Kiana? I looked at my brother, at his expensive casual wear, his successful house, his successful life built on visible achievements and quantifiable worth. The scholarship fund I endowed, I said simply, for students preparing for the Air Force Academy. You endowed a scholarship fund. Charlene's voice pitched up slightly, disbelief breaking through her usual composure. How could you possibly? A full endowment, Doctor. The R said, trying to be helpful, but really just making it worse. The fund generates approximately $150,000 annually in scholarship support. It's been transformative for our program. The math was visible on several faces. $150,000 annually meant an endowment of at least $3 million, probably more like $4 million to generate that kind of reliable income. That's not possible, Garrett said flatly. Kiana doesn't have that kind of money. Garrett, my mother's voice was strangled, Doctor. Thuru looked at me, clearly realizing she'd stepped into something complicated. I should go. I'm so sorry, Colonel. I didn't mean to. It's fine, I said. Thank you for telling me about the students. That's why I did it. She nodded quickly and retreated, leaving me standing in the center of a circle of people who were all staring with various expressions of shock, confusion, and calculation. Colonel, Garrett's voice was very quiet now. She called you Colonel. Yes, you're a colonel in the Air Force, 22 years, promoted 4 years ago, but you said you did strategic planning, budget analysis. I do for the entire Air Force Academy. I'm the Deputy Director of Plans and Programs. I oversee a $3.2 billion operating budget and coordinate all institutional planning for the Academy. The words fell into silence. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. I watched my brother process this information, watched him try to reconcile the sister he'd pied for 2 decades with the reality of what I'd just described. $3 billion, he repeated. You manage a $3 billion budget, $3.2 billion plus supplemental appropriations, and you endowed a scholarship fund for $4 million, closer to $4.5 million actually. I wanted to make sure it would sustain growth. Charlene made a small sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. Her hand found Garrett's arm, gripping it like she needed physical support. But you drive a Garrett trailed off his business mind, clearly spinning through implications. Your apartment, you said you rent. I do rent base housing. It's convenient. Base housing, he said it like he just discovered I lived in a palace. You don't need to rent base housing. You could afford. I prefer to invest my money in things that matter, I said quietly. Like ensuring students who dream of serving their country actually have the opportunity to do so. My mother had tears in her eyes. Kiana, why didn't you tell us? You never asked. I looked around at the faces watching me. Family, friends, strangers who'd spent the last hour believing I was the disappointing sister with no plan. None of you ever asked what I actually do. You decided what I was, and it was easier to let you believe it than to explain something you didn't want to understand. We thought Charlene started, you thought I'd wasted my potential, that I'd chosen wrong, that I was someone to pity. I kept my voice level factual. You built an entire narrative about my life without ever bothering to learn the first thing about my actual career. Tyler had appeared at the edge of the group, his face stricken, and Kiana. I tried to tell Dad about your rank, about what you do. He said you were probably exaggerating. Garrett's face flushed. I thought you were being supportive of your aunt. I didn't realize that she's one of the most senior officers at the academy. Tyler's voice carried a note of defense that surprised me, that she's briefed Congress. That she testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee about academy modernization. You testified before Congress. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. Twice last year, I said. Defense appropriations and military education reform. The glass in Garrett's hand, expensive crystal, probably from his wedding registry, slipped from his fingers. It hit the stone patio with a sharp crack, exploding into dozens of glittering shards. Wine spread across the stones like spilled truth pooling around his leather loafers. Nobody moved. The entire party had gone silent now, everyone watching the scene unfold with the horrified fascination of people witnessing something they'd talk about for years. I looked at my brother, at the man who'd spent 22 years believing he was the successful one, the one who'd planned correctly, the one who'd made the right choices. No kids, no savings, no plan, I said softly, repeating his words back to him. You were right about 2 of those things. I don't have kids and I don't have the kind of conventional savings you're thinking of, but I have a plan, Garrett. I've always had a plan. It's just never been a plan you could understand. I set down my wine glass on a nearby table. Thank you for inviting me. Congratulations again to Tyler. He's going to do great things. I walked through the silent crowd back through the house out to my rental car. Nobody followed me. Nobody called out. I drove away from that perfect house, that perfect lawn, that perfect life built on assumptions that had just shattered like crystal on stone. My phone rang 3 hours later. I was on I-95 halfway back to the airport when Garrett's number appeared on my screen. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again and again, left messages that progressed from shocked to apologetic to something that might have been angry. You let us think, he said in one, all this time you let us believe what? That I was less than him, that I'd failed by his metrics, that my choices were wrong because they weren't his choices. I'd let them believe exactly what they wanted to believe. Because defending yourself to people who have already decided who you are is a waste of energy better spent on actual problems. My mother called next, left a tearful voicemail about how proud she was, how she'd always known I was special, how she'd always believed in me. Revisionist history, the luxury of people who want to rewrite the past now that the present has become uncomfortable. I didn't call back. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Tyler, handwritten, 6 pages, the kind of letter people don't write anymore unless they have something important to say. He thanked me for the example I'd set, for showing him that there were different kinds of success, different kinds of legacy. He said he'd been thinking about applying to the academy himself instead of Yale, that the scholarship fund had inspired him, that he wanted to serve something bigger than his own ambition. He asked if we could talk about it, really talk. Not the surface conversations we'd had before, but actual dialogue about what it meant to serve, to commit, to choose a path that wasn't about wealth or status or any of the things his parents valued. I called him that night, we talked for 2 hours. He applied to the academy 3 months later, got in. He's there now, a freshman, learning what I learned 22 years ago, that the most important work often happens in spaces where success can't be photographed, quantified, or displayed on a mantle. I don't hate my family. Hate requires energy. I don't have to spare. I simply understand with perfect clarity that they measured my worth by metrics I never cared about. They pied me for not having children, not building conventional wealth, not following the path they understood. What they couldn't see, what they refused to see was that I'd spent 2 decades building something more valuable than any of that. I'd built a career that mattered, shaped policy, influenced outcomes that affected thousands of lives. And yes, I'd accumulated wealth doing it. Colonel's pay is better than most people realize. And 22 years of careful investment and minimal expenses adds up, but the wealth was never the point. The point was the work, the service, the knowledge that I spent my one life doing something that actually mattered. The scholarship fund was just the visible part, the part doctor Theroux could talk about at a graduation party, the part that could be measured in dollars and students sent to the academy. The invisible part, the policy decisions, the strategic planning, the budget allocations that ensured the academy could continue its mission. That was the real work. The work that would outlast me, outlast my family's judgment, outlast every assumption they'd ever made about who I was supposed to be. Garrett retired at 18, just like his plan. Bought his place in Florida, sent me a Christmas card with a photo of him and Charlene on a golf course looking tanned and relaxed and successful. I sent one back. A photo of me at my promotion ceremony to Brigadier General, 1 star on my shoulder. First female deputy director promoted to flag rank in the Academy's history. He didn't call, didn't write, but Tyler did. He sent a message that just said, "That's my aunt, that's all the validation I needed," not from people who'd spent years believing I'd failed, but from someone who'd learned what I had known all along, that the most meaningful success is measured not in what you acquire, but in what you give. Not in the legacy you leave your children, but in the legacy you leave the world. I have no children, no McMansion. No conventional markers of the life Garrett thought everyone should want. But I have something better, the knowledge that 50 students who might never have had the chance are serving their country because I made it possible. The knowledge that policies I shaped will affect military education for the next generation. The knowledge that I spent 22 years, soon to be more, doing work that mattered. That's not the kind of success you can display at a graduation party, but it's the kind that lets you sleep at night knowing your one life was spent on something bigger than yourself. And in the end, that's the only